Hi everybody, Merry Christmas. I wanted to talk to you about arranging tunes, and I've chosen to use one of the tunes from my new book on Christmas tunes as an example, although this really has nothing to do with Christmas. Really, what I want to show you is a process of arranging tunes. Could be applied to folk tunes, pop tunes, anything you'd like, but I'm going to use a Christmas tune because they're sort of fresh on my mind. And so I want to just walk you through at least the process I use. Everybody has a different process. There's no right or wrong. Exercise your own creativity to come up with whatever you like. But I'm going to show you sort of a bare bones basic approach to coming up with an arrangement for fingerstyle guitar of a tune. And I'm going to do it in DADGAD tuning because for me, that's kind of a home base. It's just a very convenient tuning, works great for fingerstyle. Not that different than standard tuning, and yet it's a little more easier to reach certain bass notes and make tunes fit and flow, I find at least. So I think this process will apply no matter what tuning you use, but if you want to follow along, I'm in DADGAD. So the first step in arranging any tune, of course, is to learn the melody. And so we'll start by trying to pick out the melody. I'm going to use a tune called The First Noel. It's a Christmas tune. And you might start, if you don't know DADGAD well, for example, you might start by using some standard scale shapes. These three strings in DADGAD are the same as standard tuning. So if you know this scale pattern, it's a common scale pattern in standard tuning, you could start there and we could figure out how to play the melody. So just doing it by ear, or you can go out on the internet and find most of these tunes. You can find the melody and the chords. Let's pick out the melody. That fits really nicely, all within a scale, which is actually really interesting. That the melody of this tune, which is not too unusual for folk tunes and tunes that are meant for people to sing. They're in a fairly constrained range, about 1 octave. And that means they're going to fit pretty nicely in the guitar. And I want to pick a key where the melody does lie sort of on the upper strings, gives me some room for bass strings underneath, maybe doesn't get too high or involve too many stretches. And it just happens that D works out nicely. Great key for DADGAD, of course, although we could use other keys in DADGAD, but I'm just going to stay in D. Now, the first thing I want to do, though, is find a way to play this that exploits some of the things that DADGAD's good at, which is ringing strings and harp effect. So I'm going to try using open strings instead of this closed scale position. And in DADGAD, you can play most of the notes of a major scale by simply playing open strings and the 2nd and 4th frets straight across the neck. So I'm going to try playing that like this. And that's nice. And it works, and again, the melody falls entirely between this D and this D. But I can do probably some more interesting things with that. One of the things, like I said, about DADGAD that's nice is this harp effect. And you get that by sort of keeping all the strings ringing and fingering things a little bit differently so that you get strings sort of creating a dissonance against each other. Let me show you a scale pattern that's a little bit different than what I just played. We can start with the 4th string open, 5th string 7th fret, 4th string 4th fret, 3rd string open, 2nd string open, and then 3rd string 4th fret, 2nd string 4th fret, open. Sounds like this. So let's try the First Noel using that scale pattern. So I love the way that rings and the notes sort of cascade over each other. And that alone is kind of pretty. So we could just use that as the beginning of an arrangement. But we probably want to add some bass notes and introduce some more variety and some harmony into it. So the next step, once I figured out some places where I can play the melody, is to add some bass notes. So again, the internet's your friend here. Just go out and do a quick search and you'll find the chords. You might have to change them to whatever key you'd like to play in. But generally, a song like this is going to be a 3-chord song. So we're going to use, in the key of D, the chords are going to be your 1, 4, and 5. The 1 chord being D, G, the 4, and A. And we don't have to worry about full chords yet. We'll just play the bass notes and add the bass notes underneath the melody, because that's enough of a challenge in a lot of cases. We have to figure out how to finger the melody and play the bass notes at the same time. So let me try to play it the way I just did and add the bass notes. So D, D again, G, D, 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 and then the 5 chord. Back to the 1 chord. Now there's some awkward fingerings in there, and that's kind of part of the challenge of doing an arrangement. You start with the melody, you figure out how to play it, then you add the bass notes. You have to change your fingering around a little bit until you figure out a way to play it. Now the other thing about this is that just playing straight bass notes is kind of boring. Like in this case, the first entire phrase is in D, so just droning on that D string isn't too interesting. So what else can we do? Well, you can play different notes of the chord against the melody and have that be your bass note. So for example, in the key of D, I'm sorry, for the chord D, we can play the root, we can play the 5th, we can play the 3rd. And that's true of all the chords. For G, we can play the root, we can play the 3rd, we can play the 5th. For the 5 chord, we can play the root, we can play the 3rd, we can play the 5th. So now we have a whole bunch of notes to work with for our bass line. And between those, you can play around, experiment. You may be able to build a bass line to where there actually is some logic and some motion to the bass, or maybe just some different sounds. So let me try this again, and I'll try to introduce some of these other notes. Instead of just droning on D, I'll play some other things. I'll use the 3rd and so on. Let's give it a try. All of a sudden it sounds a little more interesting. I was basically using the root, the 3rd of D. A couple places I used the 3rd of G instead of G, and other times I played the G. Using the 3rd of G also solved the fingering problem. It was kind of awkward playing the G root while I was playing these notes, and instead by playing this, it works really nicely. It's very convenient. So you can really work with these different bass notes, both for the sound and for the ease of fingering. Now the other thing you can do to get some variety going in your arrangements is play the melody in different places. And that's where it's kind of nice, lucky I guess, that this song lies between D and D, because by being able to play it here, that actually leaves us also the lower octave. Between these 2 Ds, we could play and so on. We could also play it up high. And there's a scale up here, a nice simple scale pattern in DADGAD. So there's a D scale. Really easy to finger. So we can play it there. So now that gives us 3 different places to play the melody. And a couple of things happen with that. One is that just it introduces variety by being in a different octave. The other is it tends to force you into different fingerings and different phrasing, because especially up high, I often find this is one of the more challenging things to do, is to play up high, because now I've got to reach some bass notes. Not too bad on the 1 chord because I've got an open D, and the 5 chord I've got an open A, but reaching the 4 chord, this G, while I'm playing up here isn't going to happen. I could play the G here, kind of high-pitched, but what ends up happening is you have to sort of get creative with your fingering, and that forces you to create variation in your arrangements. So a lot of times I start out trying to play a melody up high, and I find it's really hard and very awkward and doesn't sound very good. But as I work with it and I try to come up with creative solutions to the problems of fingerings, I end up with that being one of the cooler parts of the arrangement, where I actually come up with something a little bit different. I like it that way. Let me play you what I ended up arranging for this song. I'll try. I'm going to read the music because I don't have this memorized. But let me try to play the high melody part for you, and you'll see the kind of things that I ended up doing. So a lot of times you don't need a lot of bass notes to make this thing happen, especially when I'm playing up high. I'm just going to go for a kind of a delicate sound. And there's things you can take advantage of. Anytime I can play a harmonic, I'll try to take advantage of that, partly because they're pretty, partly because sometimes they make it a little bit easier to finger. They'll let me ring out a note while I'm moving my hand and going somewhere else. And also, you can simply work on playing this thing a little more expressively. So, for example, I did this. You can try to get vibrato. And just, create a different musical experience up there. So hopefully this gives you some ideas for arranging. You could apply these ideas to any kind of tune, I think, any kind of pop tune, any kind of folk tune. Really, the basic steps are just find a melody, figure out what the chords are, figure out where to play the bass notes and the melody at the same time, and then find the right spot on the guitar where you can do all that. Play around a little bit with phrasing and fingering. Eventually, you may be able to add in some middle voices by playing chord shapes, but often just the bass line and the melody is enough. And then you want to find some variations. The other thing you might want to do is add some interludes or introductions. I think it's one of the more fun things about doing an arrangement. You've got the melody, which somebody else wrote, and your creativity is being applied and how you figure out how to play that on the guitar. But you can also take advantage of the need to extend the piece by adding an intro, interlude between verses, to basically write something of your own. And it could be very simple. In the case of this tune, I came up with a little introduction that goes like this. I'm basically doing a descending bass line down to the 5 chord that sets up the beginning of the tune. And it goes like this. And so on into the song. So again, I hope this gives you some ideas for arranging. Best of luck. If you try this on Christmas tunes, have a wonderful holiday, and if not, apply it to whatever kind of songs you like, and just have fun doing some fingerstyle arrangements of your own. Merry Christmas.